Good morning, good evening, good night. Layer1Live, you know what it is. It's Monday. It's 1 p.m., 1:15, 1:18 p.m. We're having a great week or start to our week. It's going to be an awesome episode here. We got a couple community updates to get to. They're going to be some real good ones. And then we've got breaking news. We've got a lot of DeFi stuff that no one could have predicted happening. Quick news. We got discussion, Bitcoin, Ethereum, EOS, and DeFi today. So that is the lineup. What's going on today, fellas?
Yeah, not much, man. It's beautiful weather. Summer is here. I'm obviously not at Dimitri's desk headquarters at the moment. So right now I'm, away from the desk. But yeah, man, how's things on in Pittsburgh?
Things are good. Things are good. Crazy times still, of course, but getting through it here. Definitely a packed episode here today. We got like 6 quick news pieces, 3 discussion. But yeah, things are good. Gonna go hit some golf balls today, I think. It was a good weekend, so no complaints at all.
Yeah, I'm dropping the links for everybody in the community chat as well as Twitter. So we're getting rolling here. Like they both said, it's going to be a solid episode here. So we are in different areas right now. You see the 3 little chat boxes. We should continuously be bringing you the news from this week. So we're going to start. I'm gonna break down some stats. I'm gonna go through the community names that were given out by the community, and then once people start filling in, maybe once we have like 15 or 20 people in here, we'll drop the actual name so that everybody can kind of participate in that. But let me drop the stats here real quick, guys. It looks like Leonard's in the chat. First-time viewer and first-time chatter, Leonard Ben, Ireland viewing. So nice to see you here today, Leonard. Appreciate you stopping by. Let me get you these stats really quick. We've got top 5 countries by listens: US, UK, Germany swapped with Canada this week. So it's Germany, Canada, Australia. Top 3 episodes from this past week. We had that episode with Zach Emanian talking about interoperability on Cosmos, as well as Yatsui with Animoca Brands and Rob Finch from NFT Alert. Upcoming guests, we got Conflux that we're dropping on Wednesday, PwC with Galen on Friday, and we have Ledger Prime next Monday. So that is the lineup for the week. I'll get to the Bitcoin stakes here, fellas, but what are you excited most for in this episode?
Okay, I'll go first, I guess. There's lots of things. Obviously, the discussion piece about the Zimbabwe blocking payments. I'm super excited to talk about that. There's some interesting stuff about the Russian news, and the quick news that I'm, excited to hit too. But obviously the DeFi space, and man, it's hard to pick, a favorite topic. But Mike, what about you?
DeFi is going to be a headliner here. We're going to go through how the Balancer Pool was exploited and kind of what's going on that front. It looks like there was another second attack, so stay tuned on that front. Our friends over at Celsius as well got a little bit of money from a interesting party in the space. So of course we're going to go through that. But yeah, it's packed. We're talking BTC, talking ETH. We've got some EOS news, and then some additional DeFi news, kind of more on upcoming launches and raises versus exploits. So that's what we got.
Absolutely, man. Well, I appreciate you guys filling that in while I was dropping the links. I'm excited to get to everything that you guys just talked about. But let me go over the Bitcoin stakes really quick. For those of you that aren't familiar, obviously we've been running this kind of competition where we're guessing the price of BTC. We're up to about almost 20 people contributing to this Bitcoin stakes. Over the course of 4 weeks, we're going to see who picks the right kind of range of Bitcoin, and then at the end, whoever is the winner is going to receive somewhere between $25 and $50 worth of BTC. You could probably convince me to go up a little bit higher if you guys want, but right now it looks like Sahil and Demoff won this week. I think they guessed the range of 9,000 to 9,250. Dimitri's still sitting on 0 2 weeks in a row, man. Got the bear on 0.
Yeah, the bear is sleeping. I need to increase the leverage on my next prediction.
Yeah, go up
To
3.
make it up.
And then we got Cat in there as the cat, so we appreciated him infiltrating the Bitcoin stakes. So if you guys want to join Bitcoin stakes, it's in our community that we'll be renaming here shortly. It'll be another probably 10 to 15 minutes before we get to that. But let me go through the actual names that were sent in by everyone. You guys ready for this?
Ready.
All right, I'm gonna say a couple. I think I'm just gonna say all of them. We got Layerlings, Layerists, Layer1 Loyals, Crypt Twitter, the Pod Squad, Layer1 Legion, Layerites, Crypto Dive, Layeronians, and Crypto Clan. So those were the options. I think there's one more that we maybe didn't say there, but maybe it's coming later. What do you guys think about those initial submissions by the community?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very creative. I like the what is it, the Pod Squad. Yeah, that one is pretty funny. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably throw that one in number 2, but number 1, was not mentioned. So number 1 is obviously number 1 in my book.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll be telling Layer1 or the number 1 here in a second. So we've got about 8 people in the chat now. As people fill in, we'll go ahead and get started, man. We're going to start with a bit of breaking DeFi news. Like I said, that was not predictable at all. But Mike, why don't you get us started with the breaking news today? Renee and Leonard, nice to see you guys in the chat, man.
Yeah, so breaking news today, as some of you might have seen this weekend, Balancer was hacked. One of the pools was essentially exploited. We've been talking about this week after week where, as this has happened before with a variety of different DeFi projects, we certainly expected it to happen again. And that's kind of the general warning from the other side of crypto versus those who are kind of all in on DeFi and throwing a bunch of money at it. This was done with a Balancer pool on the Balancer project. It was a hack worth about $500,000. And some of the most troubling stuff here is really kind of the lack of not awareness, because really they were aware of the potential exploit, but just kind of the lack of effort put into doing something about this exploit that they were aware of. So yet again, this was a DYDX flash loan where essentially you can instantly take out a loan through the DYDX DeFi platform. Balancer is, just like many others, an automated market making protocol. So, they're incentivizing liquidity. They're trying to build these liquidity pools so that, there's essentially enough liquidity there for people to borrow and lend on their platform. This happened on Sunday, 6 p.m. UTC, started with a flash loan for 104,000 ETH, about $23 million. And the exploit was done using Statera's liquidity pool. Statera is essentially a smaller market cap, very smaller market cap now, deflationary token where essentially every transaction that occurs, 1% of that transaction is automatically burned. So it's a way to basically program in a deflationary model for, that project. And unfortunately, the exploit, whoever conceived the exploit understood that Balancer smart contracts were not aware of this deflationary token model. So essentially what happened was this hacker took out the flash loan on DYDX and began exchanging Statera and ETH back and forth. So as every transaction happened, 1% of the total was burned, and Balancer did not account for this. So, each time the STA, the Statera balance that was available in the pool diminished by 1%. But like I said, the smart contract didn't account for this. So you essentially had Balancer saying, hey, there's all this Statera in the pool, when really based on the way that the Statera token works, it wasn't there. So then after the hacker had done this 24 times to basically drain the Statera pool, he completed basically like an action that allowed the pool to go through and refresh the amount of tokens that were in the pool, at which point the pool obviously saw, hey, there's no Statera here. And in that case, in order to incentivize people to put Statera in, raise the premium super high on the Statera. And the hacker then took what is the equivalent of 1/100000th of a Statera token and started swapping it for other assets on the platform. Because you have to remember now, the Statera, based on the lack of liquidity in the pool, has, you know, some massively high premium. So the hacker swapped it for ETH, BTC, Chainlink, and Synthetics, which were the four assets that were stolen that accounted for about $500,000. You know, they never actually had to exchange the 1/100000th of the Statera, which is called a way sta. You know, based on the way that the burn mechanism works. So he just continued to, you know, swap this back and forth and drained, you know, pretty much the remaining amounts that were in each of those pools. So after that, you know, kind of took the Balancer Pool tokens and cashed them out to ETH on Uniswap. And as of late, no one really knows who did it. They used a mixer, and they have done a pretty good job of obscuring the funds. Now, you know, we definitely expected this to happen. You know, it's something we talked about. It's just one of those things, right? When you see 2, 3, 4 different projects go through an exploit like this and a brand new DeFi project come out, the chances that this is going to happen, in my mind at least, are greatly increased. But really the most worrisome part here is that the CTO of Balancer, Mike McDonald, evidently went on Twitter and was talking back and forth with an account called Hex Capital, who in this Cointelegraph article basically said that they had very clearly laid out this exploit to the Balancer team, to Mike McDonald, and brought that up in this tweet thread. And McDonald admitted that he didn't think it was a big deal and decided not to fix the exploit, said that he wasn't really aware of the 1% burn mechanism that you know, happened with Statera, and you know, left it there. Now it gets better because this happened again. So there was a second attack. You know, they decided not to pause anything, evidently. Fortunately, this hack only stole about $2,300. It was about 10 compound, 10 of the comp tokens, and they had to use something like $32 million in order to do it. But not good, right? You never want to see anybody's funds who was on Balancer get stolen, especially if it really kind of looks like negligence on the part of Balancer, to be honest. So, you know, not the most kind of thrilling breaking news story, but also not the most surprising one. And that is where we land at present time for Balancer.
Yeah, it was interesting to see an announcement that they came out with probably in like the last, I would say like 4 or 5 hours, where they're actually going to be repaying any of the investors that had stolen funds. So that's always an interesting topic. I think there's been some DeFi insurance platforms that have kind of been propped up over the past couple times. This would be an obvious use case for that. Another thing is that most of the DeFi hacks that have happened, now correct me if I'm wrong, have happened because of like Oracle delays, whereas this was like simply an exploit that kind of used the token economic model of STA, like you were saying. But it's interesting that those were more Oracle delays. Was this maybe one of the first times that it was like a token model where there's like deflation involved, and they were able to exploit the actual model, not the Oracle delays that you see on Ethereum?
Yeah, this was the first time that Statera was involved, as far as I know. The piece that continues to come up is the flash loans piece. So that seems to be a prominent piece, you know, that's a part of every exploit. So, you know, sometimes it's flash loans and the oracles, like I think we saw with maybe Synthetics or one of those there. Yeah. And then this time it's, you know, flash loans with Statera. So having the ability to use the flash loans, there has been some pushback on DYDX offering those, and you know, a lot of folks, it seemed like Balancer as well, were kind of like, well, if it wasn't for the flash loans, this wouldn't happen. And it's like, well, if you had fixed the problem in the first place, it wouldn't have happened either. So, you know, kind of who's to blame here, right? But at the end of the day, this is a prime example of you know, an instance in crypto where everything is open source, right? You can go through, and if you have the experience, if you have the wherewithal, you can look through the code and understand exactly what the code says. The code does not discriminate in any way, right? It doesn't care whether or not your money's in there or not. But by utilizing a variety of different processes, or in this case, token mechanics, very, very smart hackers are able to kind of put together a scenario where the code isn't necessarily broken, but can be exploited. Right. Mm-hmm. There wasn't something there that existed in Balancer that very directly let people take money from Balancer. It was obviously the contextual information alongside Balancer that allowed for the exploit to happen. So even with, what you would call perfect audited Balancer code, it doesn't mean that some sort of exploit or hack or whatever you want to call it can't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to just add, this kind of makes it. Is it the black hat yield farming? Is it what it is?
This is like the guy who steals the cows from the farmer, right?
Yeah,
in the little community. Yeah.
I think so. Another thing that they came out with is saying that they will have a bug bounty, right? So now that they're going to be, rewarding those that, basically find these exploits or bugs to get some of these, white hat hackers, or whatever, to look at it and make sure that it doesn't happen. But in general, like we know in DeFi, things tend to move quick and break things, right? Rather than kind of wait and, see how things are and beta test it or whatnot, right? It seems like DeFi is pretty quick in jumping in and trying to capture the moment, especially when DeFi is making headlines and is the theme in the market, right? They're trying to catch that hype, which essentially, ends up resulting in some damage that they do, right? So I think that's just the surface, right, of the issues of the DeFi space in general, right? We know that DeFi space is so heavily leveraged through these yield farming right now. So, the real worry for me is that once that will unwind, and eventually it will, because once the volatility picks up and so on, right? Once we have margin calls and all that stuff happen, I hope that the damage itself won't put a huge taint on the DeFi space, bad cloud over it, right? It will eventually happen, but I just hope it's not gonna be like, well, DeFi is gonna be viewed as like ICOs or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just because people didn't really understand what was coming and so on.
It almost seems par for the course right now with this 500K hack happening and the community kind of just steamrolling on by, and DeFi continues to kind of go. Obviously, it made headlines, but it wasn't like a let's stop everything that's going on right now. Let's continue going, and like you said, let's break things. And it's almost like there are going to be some eggs broken, right? So we're going to continue to go on. But if something like maybe happen with a compound situation where you have a lot of DeFi pools going on within that platform, it's like, well, then you might be dealing with something else. Like if I think we're reading a story later on the quick news that said something like $1 billion is locked up on the compound platform at this point. So if something ever happened maybe to that smart contract platform or smart contract within that platform, maybe you have bigger issues for DeFi. So
I think the biggest problem that I see is the risk of when we hit volatility is the liquidity that will be available to unwind those positions. And if everybody wants to think that there will be liquidity just based on theory, but we know that when huge unprecedented volatility takes place, we saw it during the time when March was when we had that BTC dropped to 3.8K. That was actually liquidity drying up, and some of that, obviously compound was unwinding positions that were illiquid and so on, right? So that is really the biggest risk that I see, is just that people, I think, are not taking in consideration the limitation of liquidity if things hit the fan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're going to talk more DeFi later, I think, in the discussion portion, as well as DeFi and its own kind of discussion piece. So we can touch on more situations within that sector within a little while. But let me get to some of these comments in the chat. We've got Renee talking about Kava. He asked for our take on Kava. Leonard's in the chat asking about Zaliqua, Kyber, Mautic, and Compound. I guess he's just showing his bags there. And Meta's in the chat as well saying hi, folks. So it's nice to see you in here, Meta. It looks like we're up to 10 people in the chat right now, so we appreciate you guys stopping by. We'll continuously go on here. I think we're gonna wait another 10 minutes, let some people kind of trickle in here, and we'll announce the name of the Layer 1 community that was kind of sourced to that community itself. So it'll be interesting to see what we ended up with here shortly. So let's go into quick news. I know Mike's gonna talk some Celsius, and then we'll get into the rest of the quick news.
Yeah, for sure. So I got two quick news pieces here. Celsius has been doing a fundraiser. We talked, I think it was last week, about how you could go on Bank to the Future, and if you were an accredited investor and had a minimum of, I think, $1,000, you could get some access to Celsius equity during their fundraiser. And interestingly enough, as of June 22nd, it came out that Alex Mashinsky, the CEO and founder of Celsius, has said that, believe it or not, they've received a $10 million investment from Tether USDT, the kind of infamous stablecoin within crypto, which, to his point in this article on Cointelegraph, is one that has in some way, amidst lawsuits and all sorts of other chaos within the world right now, been able to increase their market cap by ninefold. It was at $1 billion and now is at $9 billion, third by market cap, compared to all other cryptocurrencies, and is one that I think as time goes on will end up coming into the second spot and beating ETH. But anyway, it's $10 million from Tether. They're raising a total of $30 million in equity, which would bring its overall valuation to $150 million. I think Alex is smart here. He understands that, you want to really raise money when you don't have to. It's always a lot easier to raise money at that point. And then obviously working with Tether is going to do some interesting things for the Celsius platform now that, Tether has a literal equity stake in the company. One thing that Mashinsky hinted at was that in the coming months, quote, Celsius will be marrying together all the services that Tether and Bitfinex offer. So pretty much anything you see on Bitfinex now, you might be able to make the assumption that at some point it will be available on Celsius in some way. So big news for Celsius there. A huge partnership, huge investor to have there on their side, even though all the chaos from Tether in the past years has existed. On the other side, kind of worse news when it comes to crypto.com and the TenX card. Both of them offer debit cards, which evidently have been frozen following this giant Wirecard scandal in Europe. So for those of you who don't know, there is a giant kind of money laundering and auditing scandal with a company called Wirecard out of Germany, who, for whatever reason, for 3 years was not audited by Ernst & Young. And all of a sudden, auditors found that they have over $2 billion worth of funds that have been missing for some time. So the CEO turned himself in to German authorities and looks like is going to be charged with money laundering and fraud and all sorts of other things. And evidently crypto.com and TenX, both of these crypto debit card issuers, have said that their customers in the UK and the rest of Europe are not going to be able to either increase the amount of funds they have on the card or pull funds off yet. However, it's important to note that they said the funds are not held by Wirecard, they're held by another bank. So Wirecard is just kind of the person that issues those crypto debit cards. So the funds are safe, according to crypto.com and TenX. There's no issue with any of the funds, having been hacked or stolen by Wirecard folks. It's just a matter of obviously going through the full process, figuring out what the best way is for crypto.com and TenX to, not only get people's money back, but hopefully continue as crypto debit card providers. So pretty crazy event there. Definitely black swan-ish, if you will, when it comes to those who are using crypto.com or TenX debit cards. But these days, it feels like anything can go down. So be safe out there.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the stock, I'm pretty sure I saw that their stock went up like 200% today, which is crazy.
Oh no,
It's only right.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, and the CEO that was arrested, apparently, he's been financial industry for like 2 decades, so it's like, I don't know how this whole thing like
Mm,
happens. It's insane. And yeah, in regards to the funds, so yeah, they're regulated by FCA, so they have to hold a segregated account. So therefore, it's protected there. So it's
mm.
segregated basically. All right, so yeah, moving right along, got the next two pieces here. So the first one is about Tezos. It kind of goes back to the lawsuit, back in when they held the ICO, and the SEC has been lurking around to collect some of the bounties from these ICOs, like Tezos, for example. Obviously they've been kind of making the headlines before, and now finally. There's some movement that's happening where it's most likely going to be settled for about 25 million. Looks like they're saying the court has granted preliminary approval for 25 million settlement for that Tezos ICO class action lawsuit. And Tezos basically came out and said, hey, we're pretty much going to take this because they really don't want to prolong this period, right, of going back and forth and with these lawsuits, right? They're very costly to drag them out, right? And there's many things that like, right, internally and externally where you have the investors that were suing and so on, right? So they just want to wipe the whole slate clean with 25 million because they know in the long run, first of all, that's going to be way better for the Tezos Foundation not to have that dark cloud over them the whole time when they're trying to, maybe do some stuff and, bring enterprises and so on, right? Have some partnerships there. So, they want to settle this as quickly as possible. It looks like they're going to probably sell it for like 25 mil, call it a day, shake hands. And then, part of that settlement is probably going to be where, it's going to say, hey, listen, they didn't do anything kind of like, they didn't admit to the wrong or the right, kind of like that statement where it's like, well, we just basically pay for our mistakes through money. And that's kind of has been the theme there when it comes to these ICOs that are being chased down by SEC. So it's good stuff, in terms of just having that settled and washed away, and then we can move along for Tezos without having that in the background. The next piece of news is coming from Russia, so that hits closer to home, at least for me. And so so Russia is going through some interesting stuff because Putin is basically coming up on kind of the end of his presidency in terms of being a president based on constitutional time frame that exists in the Russian constitution. So right now, Russia is basically voting on changes to the constitution to allow the good old Vladimir to, to rule Russia for another, 2 terms of 6 years. So, so the headline here is basically saying that Russia's blockchain-based e-vote system suffers node attack. Shocker. So it's we've talked about like how using blockchain in voting would be like very good, and all these benefits and so on, right? Well, it looks like Russia tried to do this, and they've had so many problems with it. In some instances where people that voted online, it turned out to be like in that area there was like only 2.3k people registered to vote, but 7,300 people voted somehow. Nobody really knows how. And some people that voted by paper could then go online and vote online as well. So the whole thing is just like it's not good when it comes to showing the results that the blockchain can do when it comes to voting. And we know, like for Russia, it's like might not be the best platform to test this out, because just knowing how Putin wants to retain the control, right? So they're gonna try to push that constitutional change no matter what, and like they're not gonna want more transparency on voting. Like, get out of here. So if this, everything goes well, for this constitutional change, it means that Vladimir is going to be in power until 2036. So.
Can't wait for that. Yeah, I feel like the U.S. has had its own problems with mail-in voting and the fraud that goes along with that. So it is interesting to see kind of the pipe dream of blockchain kind of reinvigorating or having that paradigm shift of voting from home or maybe just voting in general. So yeah, maybe Russia's not the best place to test that out. But speaking of Russia, obviously Telegram has had their run-ins with Russia a little bit, and they just got out of the weeds, if you will, with the Russian government. I think Russian users can now freely kind of use Telegram, but right when they got out of the weeds there, the SEC came in. They said, no, you got to come back here. You got to pay us $18.5 million. So it looks like out of the total raise, and I'm going back here, I think they raised somewhere in the vicinity of, was it 1.7 billion if I'm correct? I know I'll read directly.
Close to 2, yeah.
Yeah, I'll read directly from this article here. It says, the Telegram will pay 18.5 and notify the U.S. So the SEC if it plans to issue any sort of digital currency in the next 3 years. It goes along to say that the settlement, which was reached on June 11th, effectively ends a 6-month court fight. Yada yada yada. Also indicates the messaging platform will be responsible for a 1.22 billion disgorgement that is offset by 1.19 billion paid in rounds to investors over the course of 4 years. So that is kind of a story there. Basically, Telegram is paying a fine to the SEC as well as laying out the infrastructure to pay back all of the investors that had invested in that ton token back in the day. So I guess, this is it's right in the middle, right? It's kind of bearish. You have to pay the SEC, but just like Dimitri said, once you do pay that settlement, I feel like you are kind of getting to the light at the end of the tunnel there. So ton of analogies I just threw at you guys. Hopefully you can unwind that a little bit. While you do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Compound. Obviously we talked about Compound early in the episode. It looks like the CEO of Compound, I believe it's Robert Leshner, he came out on Twitter and kind of laid out a tweet as well as kind of a screenshot that showed the total supply that is now within Compound. It looks like $1 billion now locked up in Compound, 30% of that being BAT, 24% of that being ETH, and then 21% of that being USDC, which I'm sure there's a couple others, small amounts that go about that. I'm gonna read a couple other points here that come from the article, but Compound obviously saw that huge run up to, like, I believe it was $330 dollars. I think it even wicked up to 400 something at one point. RIP that poor soul. But as of Sunday, June 28th, 31% of the value in the platform is BAT, 23 ETH and 22% UDC. That value being supplied by 29,308 users, as well as talking about the borrowing. It looks like 75% of borrowing is for BAT. About 10% of that is USDT. DAI is 8%, and it looks like there's 4,000 borrowers on the platform. So just a couple stats there as far as Compound's concerned. Good to see. It's funny how much Maker's fallen off the grand stage, if you will, and Compound's kind of the new chick at the dance. But it's good. It's great to see DeFi being built out the right way. I'm not gonna be an expert on DeFi anytime soon. I need to obviously do my research and continue to do so. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like Compound's carrying the flag rather well. I don't know. What do you guys think about Compound so far?
Yeah, it's crazy how like nobody's talking about Maker anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's absolutely the case. Yeah, it's Compound. Obviously, it's like when you see the price of a token just continues to rise, with the DeFi community that's relatively strong in terms of their opinion, and that's bound to kind of blow up and make many headlines, and so on, right? So it is what it is right now. We'll see how Compound obviously is gonna continue, right? Or there's many different things that are being introduced. We'll talk about at the end about the options that are going to start to be available on Compound. So We'll see. It's definitely an interesting experiment to witness.
Yeah, Mike, before you hop in here, it's funny because Dimitri was talking about how governance tokens are often used as like a way as a scapegoat for teams to kind of like vanish, and that's kind of my worry here as you see the kind of value of Compound rise. Obviously, the pockets of those members at Compound, I don't know like what type of vesting schedule they have or what have you, but obviously it's kind of a worrisome aspect when I think, let me go back to the article. The tweet is reading, excited for comp holders to expand and upgrade Compound, taking it past the next major milestone. I think it says something about them jumping into governance. It's like, well, what's going to happen with you? You leaving, Jared, or sorry, Robert. But anyways, what were you going to say, Mike? Sorry about hopping in there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point on governance. Balancer's governance token just came out right before their exploit, evidently. So kind of interesting timing for people to go and use their tokens as a way to, change the protocol in some way or another. And then Compound, it'll be interesting if they are able to drastically get above $1 billion. Maker hit $1 billion at some point, but never really kind of climbed too far past that. But to me, it's a clear example of really innovation in the DeFi sector starting to wear on Maker. If you can go on Compound and as a speculator or a yield farmer or whatever you want to call it, make so much more money theoretically over the next year, why would you borrow or lend on Maker, right? And I imagine at some point in the near future, there will be another platform that, unlike a Balancer, is able to launch and provide some other really interesting DeFi, quote unquote, use case that allows people to come on and complete some actions, which theoretically benefit the project, but also ensure that those early users risking, funds will be able to get paid. So I think it's going to continue to happen. I don't think comp is here forever. It's going to be a rotating kind of king's seat, if you will, in DeFi for a long time, assuming all of these exploits don't eventually wear on DeFi to kind of more of a final instance. But congrats to what Compound has done thus far. Ton of volatility. If you're trading Compound, my goodness, it's either it's either heaven or hell there, pretty much.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick before we get into discussions. So it's also interesting how these governance tokens, like let's say Balancer, right, gets added to like FTX, where you can trade that thing on leverage. You can go long, you can go short, and basically, if you're, let's say, if you want to just kind of put on the tinfoil hat and talk about some conspiracies, you can have, let's say, the foundation itself, right? The guys that are exiting might be taking some short positions, when they're cashing out. So it's like there's many different things that can be done in introduction of leverage and these products, when it's just a governance token. You're attracting a lot of speculators, not the guys who are looking to use the token as a tool, as a utility to actually do things as far as the governance goes, right? So there's obviously the crowd that will do those things for the governance, right? We'll use it as a utility, but the majority of it right now is obviously just speculators, right? And therefore, we see that price where it's trading right now, or we see being introduced on platforms like FTX, and so on. So,
all great points on the kind of the state of, I guess, Maker and kind of Compound and how it goes with governance, I guess. So great points, guys. We made it to discussion, kind of our favorite part of the episode here. A couple quick things. Scott, you're in the chat. It looks like Kieran's in the chat as well. Kieran says, "Sir, please." Scott gives us the raise fist. Scott, I sent you over the private group chat. I didn't see you in the kind of our community channel within Telegram, so I kind of private messaged you on Telegram. See if you get that link. Otherwise, for those of you that are new and maybe want to be part of our community as well, I dropped the public channel where you can kind of get in contact with me, Dimitri, or Mike, and we can kind of maybe get you into the private Telegram group that it kind of is reserved for the hardcore users or the hardcore listeners of Layer 1. So I guess without further ado, guys, we don't really have like anything surrounding this other than kind of dropping the name. We kind of talked about it early in the episode, but we had the community kind of send in names for the community name itself. We had some good ones. I think there's the Layer 1 Legion was good. The Loyals were good. The Pod Squad was pretty good. So I think we're gonna drop the name now. Who wants to do it, man?
I'll do the drum roll.
Okay, you'll do the drum roll. All right, go ahead.
Wait, no. Am I the one doing it? All right. So the winner is Layer 1 Autonomous Digital Zone, which is LADZ. LADZ.
Boom. So that was the winner. I mean, we looked at it. It instantly kind of is relevant. Obviously, it's pretty interesting in and of itself. But also the acronym was awesome. Just like kind of like saying it out loud. And then we have female viewership, I'm sure. But once our female viewership kind of grows, we can say lads and ladies. So it's going to be, and it could be spelled the same way. So although, Kieran, we did love your Layer 1 Legion, we are officially announcing that this community is going to be the lads. So lads, from this point on, good to see everybody in the chat. I'm going to be using that 100% from now on. What do you think? What do you think about that, Mike?
I love it, man. That was my vote. So I thought that was pretty much a clear winner. Thanks to whoever sent that one in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So from now on, guys, I think I'm going to even change the old Telegram group. We'll see how far it goes. But the lads is going to be the way it rolls from here on out. So we're going to start our discussion. Actually, before we get to the discussion portion, we did have some comments that we need to touch on from earlier in the episode. So we had Renee asking about Kava. Any general thoughts on Kava?
Kava seems to be pretty well put together. That we actually did an episode with Kava. It was a long time ago, many months ago, but check that out, Renee. We had, I think it was their CEO on at the time, Brian Kerr, and he did a really good job of explaining Kava. And since then, they have executed really well. I think as of last week, we were talking about on Layer1Live how they had officially launched, and I know a lot of people are excited for what they're looking to do with non-ETH assets when it comes to DeFi. So, Bitcoin, Ripple, I think BNB was in there, Cosmos. I think they have a really unique, kind of vector of attack, if you will, that they're looking for. They're doing something that not everybody else is doing and working with a lot of those non-ETH assets and building on the Cosmos SDK. So yeah, we're definitely fans of Kava.
Yeah, I like what they're doing with BNB. It looks like they're offering BNB rewards and kind of adding that to their little ecosystem. So I think that kind of is probably targeting more Binance users, but obviously if you're interested in Binance and maybe not like a power user from them, that's an interesting integration that they had in their platform. Always good to see a little bit.
Yeah, and if we
sure.
if we obviously have lads interested in the Kava, we can bring them back and have an interview with them again. See what the updates are there. We obviously want to keep up with any changes, and we usually like to have our guests come back and talk about what has changed since the last time we saw him. So
absolutely, we'll ping Brian and see if we can get him on again. But that was a good episode. Really quick, I mean, we can be real short with this, but Zaliqua, Kyber, Matic, and Compound. We touched a little bit on Compound. I think obviously we're pro Compound, but any thoughts on Zaliqua, Kyber, or Matic? I think I've heard of. I think I remember Matic back in the day. They were a Binance Launchpad. That was kind of doing smart contract platform for, I think they were attacking gaming at the time. But what do you guys think?
You've been listening to us make fun of Zilica too much and call it Zaliqua. But so we usually call it Zaliqua, even though it's Zilica. But had to get you on that one there. But yeah, I mean, Kyber Compound we already talked about, right? Kyber of the four seems to have kind of the most traction right now. Zilica was pumping for some reason, but I can't remember what it was. And then when I think of Matic, I can't help but think of that massive dump that they had, which I don't even remember what it was for. But yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember that either. I know there was like some kind of, we tried to get a hold of their CEO too. So I think there was like some like event around why their token was dumping real hard. But yeah, any thoughts there, Dimitri? You just gonna rag on me for Zilliqa and be done with it?
Ziliqua. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Zeal, we've talked about it on desk multiple times. It's been running up pretty well. So, but other than that, beyond the price action, I wouldn't have any much to say about them. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds good. We've got Kieran asking one question that would probably fit in a discussion piece here. He says, "Sir, I'm looking for a Layer1 smart contract platform that's got low transaction fees and an active community. ETH fees too high." What would you guys say in that moment? You got 10 seconds to answer.
Average is 15 cents right now, so it's not crazy high, but it's definitely higher than normal.
All right, so he's sending you right back to ETH, Kieran. So stay there and like it. So we've got some discussion portions here. We appreciate you guys following along. Please do like the video, and if you're here for the first time, we're doing news on Mondays. We got TA on Tuesdays, Fridays, and interviews Wednesdays and Fridays. So, oh yeah, Scott's dropping the EOS. So shilling a little EOS. We love doing that on this channel. But we've got a discussion portion here that's filled with a couple global economic situations, as well as Ethereum DeFi. Kind of we're kind of touching on what Kieran's asking there, as well as there's rumors about public blockchains and their relationship to maybe China's government infrastructure. So we'll touch on that here shortly. We've got the Zimbabwe piece first. What do we got, Dima?
Yep. So we'll start with global economics first. So basically, Zimbabwe, is obviously struggling due to the economic situation there. We've known that they've been struggling for some time, and they've been experimenting, doing many different things to kind of stabilize their currency, the Zimbabwe dollar. Before that, they had actually, I believe, 3 different currencies that they could use in Zimbabwe, where they relied on foreign currencies as part of their cash that they could use, like the Japanese yen, US dollar, and the pound sterling. But eventually Zimbabwe basically came out and said, hey, listen, no, we're banning all the use of foreign currencies in our country, and we're gonna have our Zim dollar. Boom. So they switched over, and then obviously things started going south. The inflation started picking up for their currency, especially right now, given the global situation just in the world. Countries that were struggling before, now it's just like amplified. And they're suffering ridiculous inflation right now. It's like 750% as far as the inflation is locally. So what has happened, there was this company that's called EcoCash in Zimbabwe that basically allows the citizen there to be able to make payments or transfer funds electronically, right? Rather than have stockpiles of cash that we've seen pictures of that before, where people just have these huge baskets where they have to, bring to the shop to just buy like loaf of bread, which is super inefficient and so on, right? So EcoCash came in and basically started, doing electronic transfers for the currencies, which was much more convenient for the Zimbabwe people to use. But also the thing is, the EcoCash did give the ability for the Zimbabwe people to buy Bitcoin. And guess what? If their dollar, which is the Zimbabwe dollar, if it's like falling in value like crazy, and they have the ability to get into Bitcoin, then they'll do that just to preserve the value, because the volatility of Bitcoin is not as crazy as the volatility of their local currency, which is, for some people that live in countries that, like US and first world countries, we don't really talk about it because we're like, hey, listen, Bitcoin is so volatile. Like, why the hell would I use it, for store of value, But in these countries, obviously, it is, completely different. So, so with all that being said, the Zimbabwe government basically came out and said, hey, listen, we're blocking all mobile money payments, for the citizen. So the government said, hey, listen, no, you can't use this app anymore. You can't electronically transfer cash. You have to use physical cash, which is like ridiculous, especially where they are right now. And the reason why they're doing this, the government's trying to enforce this, is because obviously they want to prevent from their local currency from collapsing, because they've noticed an outflow of capital out of their currency into perhaps in Bitcoin, and maybe some others, like dollar and so on, right? So, there's this whole like issue where basically the government is saying, hey, listen, you got to suspend all the mobile payments. But then this company, the EcoCash, came out and said, hey, listen, you actually don't have the authority to tell us to stop this. It's actually the central bank of Zimbabwe that can tell us only to stop this. So we're going to continue to do this. So it's like a little weird stuff is going on. Right now, BTC is actually trading about 18% above the market rate in Zimbabwe. So obviously there's demand there, which is actually better premium than probably what we've seen in other countries that experience some hardship, and basically government trying to restrict the purchase of Bitcoin, where they end up buying Bitcoin for like 40 north of 40% of premium of spot market. So this is obviously goes into the discussion that I love to have, where it's like, well, okay, so when these struggling countries are experiencing hardship, and instead of the government tries to keep them as a hostage in the situation, because if you open up all the borders and restrictions, then people are basically going to ditch their government currency, because they might not have trust in the government, in their currency, in their economy, but they can't do that because they can constantly get restricted by the government, and to keep the the society kind of hostage in the situation that they're in, basically. So like ideally we obviously want to see the onboarding on ramps for these countries, right? But then again, if that happens, then the overall country will economically collapses, right? So it's like there's kind of pros and cons, right? You let your citizens to kind of escape and preserve their capital that they probably worked hard for, or with that being said, like that, if they do escape with their capital preserved, that means that you're risking the complete collapse of your economy. But if you don't let them escape, then you can preserve maybe the economy, and kind of stop the bleeding of that local currency, which will preserve the overall nation of itself. So it's like, which one would you pick, right? And what do you guys think of, what is kind of the right way for these countries? If they're struggling, they're being kept as a hostage. Should the governments allow them to get out of their local currency at whatever rate they want?
I mean, at this point, with your Zimbabwe and your Argentina and your Lebanon, right? Those that have basically, completely collapsed in this coronavirus era, they're not going to really have a choice anymore. I mean, this banning of mobile money payments is their attempt at, I guess, shutting off EcoCash. But EcoCash has said, they're going to keep rolling with it, and they're not going to shut off, and basically going to run the platform illegally. But even if they do get shut off, the opportunity with Bitcoin and a variety of other digital methods, be it cryptocurrencies or otherwise, I'm sure are already prevalent in Zimbabwe. So I think it's really a matter of time until it gets so bad, and maybe this is that catalyst, that it gets so bad that people start to revolt, and you kind of devolve into this giant realm of chaos, and it's terrible to see with those folks who are obviously in the country or from the country. I mean, it's it's a prime example of the government really kind of falling apart and not doing what it needs to do to help the economy along, and serve and protect for its citizens.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I know it's kind of a meme, but the way that Akon's going about building this like city that's going to be specifically built on cryptocurrency, it'll be interesting to see that as a kind of use case within that kind of realm of Africa. I wonder what large scale cryptocurrency use cases look like, because if you could kind of prove out that a cryptocurrency could be used like large scale in a city, maybe you can figure out how to, work Zimbabweans and being able to like completely switch to maybe I can't see a country like completely transacting in Bitcoin, right? Like let's completely move over to Bitcoin. Forget the Zimbabwe dollar or whatever the Zimbabwe currency is, and let's just completely all transact on Bitcoin. Obviously there's like other scaling use cases you can figure out there to where someone can pay on a daily basis and not have to worry about some type of transaction fees. You can some type of abstraction like the Lightning Network might be used there, but it's just like interesting to think about what a large city would look like just using Bitcoin, and whether that's even kind of able to happen, regardless of like a scalability point of view. The other thing that's super interesting is we talked with it was Conflux, and they said that they set up a Nigerian headquarters because they really think that Jack Dorsey does, that Africa specifically, when it comes to like mobile transactions and things like that, is like the next hotbed, because they've essentially skipped the landline portion of technology and just moved straight to mobile. And this article actually talks about that, right? It says mobile wallets accounted for 85% of all transaction volume in Zimbabwe. So, that just kind of proves everything that we're hearing about, mobile and what Africa can do from like a mobile standpoint. If you onboard, these different countries, how big that is for these different platforms. But going back to that first one, what do you think, Dimitri? Do you think an entire city could run on Bitcoin? Yeah, like hypothetical scalability is not an issue.
Right. So I think kind of a better question is just you have to really think about what is kind of money, right? It's and how is it being used? What is the purpose of it? So it's kind of like the ledger, right, of how we keep the track of credits that people have and people don't have, and how do we update that ledger and so on, right? I was actually listening to a podcast, I think it was with Layer1. It was one of the guys that was talking about specifically the digital dollar and how it is different and so on, right? And it's really not kind of like, will Bitcoin be kind of a currency? It's really just setting up the most efficient ledger system for payments. That's really what it should be. It doesn't have to be specifically like a specific like token like Bitcoin or something like that. It's really something that has to be done the most efficient way, transparent and kind of stable and just decentralized, basically. But the problem is that when it comes to these type of countries where the corruption is typically high, they don't really want to have transparency, right, and the records to that extent where it can be exposed. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the background where the inefficiencies of the currency of those countries has to do with the corruption that's embedded in those countries. So it's really the core of it, right? Until that changes, we can talk about many different things, like how how we can structure the currency situation there. But really, it's just the bigger problem is really just the corruption that's there and the no enforcement of kind of being policing it, right? So
yeah, there's no clearly. I can imagine there's no trust between the citizens and the government. So even taking it a step back, when you look at using a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin for a city or a country like Zimbabwe, the problem is even kind of more rooted in the fact that governments are unable to enforce the collection of taxes, right, to kind of pay for the various expenditures that they need. So if you can't, if Bitcoin is now the dominant currency and people are, making the decision between, hey, am I going to starve or am I going to pay the taxes that I owe, this country? Guess what they're going to do, right? They're, they're going to make sure they have food on the table, basically. So it's not, that's why the government has to keep their currency afloat, right? It's what they control. It's what they get paid in. It's what, all of the expenditures are used for and taxes are collected in, because if that stops and, all of the essential government workers are no longer paid, then the government basically falls apart, and you run into that kind of realm of chaos that I was talking about. So, transaction speed doesn't matter if, or whatever doesn't matter if, you have no way to enforce taxation. So,
Interesting conversation, guys. If you're following along here, and I think Scott actually had a comment that I'll read off shortly, but if you guys are following along and like the conversation, go ahead and leave your own comment, man. We want to hear from you guys while we discuss this. It's not just our thoughts. It's definitely, we want to hear from you guys. But Scott's saying, related to discussion on screen, I personally convert crypto to USD when needed and spend it locally. Does that negatively affect the U.S. economy? I doubt it, but what do I know? I think Scott's in Toronto or in Canada, I believe. So based on that, what do you guys think on that question?
So we've talked about how, like, crypto and BTC can be used as kind of the proxy to the dollar. But it really comes down to, like, to what scale of that is being done. So it's like, if there's a very small percentage of the population that does it and the overall currency of that country is stable, then hey, nobody was really going to care about it, right? This is kind of like the reason why the US doesn't really care much about BTC as much as other countries care, like Zimbabwe or Argentina or whatever, those that are struggling, where they see a huge outflow of money. He's in California. So yeah, I mean, no, in this case,
California.
In this case, it doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't affect it at all. But it's just in general, really for those countries that have inflation is spiraling out of control and their value of currency is dropping like crazy. That's where it's negative when you have people that are using BTC or crypto as a proxy to get into the dollar, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it directly.
Yeah, I guess that kind of shifts the question a little bit if he's spending the currency in country as opposed to kind of using USD and then converting it, or using USD outside of the country in his own like home. If he lived in Toronto or some sort. But yeah, certainly, like, I guess USD would be hurt if he spent the crypto at those locations as opposed to converting it to USD first before spending.
Well, I wouldn't really talk about USD being hurt just in general, just because it's a global reserve currency, so it's like something like this, it would be really hard to have an impact on USD. Like, it has to be to such a crazy scale that to have an impact of it, so like it would be easier to compare this to other currencies that are not global reserve currencies where it does have an effect, but to really have an effect on USD or the economy at a scale where USD is the global reserve currency, where all the commodities are being settled in USD everywhere across the world, try to impact that with the cryptocurrency that some dude is just buying, like a small population percentage is buying. Like, that's really not going to affect it that much.
Got it. All right. Awesome. Well, ODOT's having a conversation too. Scott, man, you've been talking about your family in Los Angeles, so I don't know why I thought you were in Toronto. Maybe I thought you were an expat over there. But anyways, ODOT's here. He's saying, living in a third world country, I can say we are far from that. For example, I'm full in crypto and I cash out when I need money. But the people here don't even know how to use a bank app correctly. So yeah, certainly adoption on the ground is a problem. Anyways, I'm gonna move on to this next discussion piece, guys. It looks like there's up to 15 people in the chat now. Kind of a slow start, but we're getting there. But we have another story here. Graph Protocol, I guess, runs 65% of all the assets that flow through DeFi use Graph Protocol, at least 65% of it, and they use that to query data essentially. So I guess they're before this week, or I guess in the last 2 weeks, the Graph queries have grown from 25 million per day to 45 million. And I guess the complexity of those queries is increasing as kind of DeFi takes off, and we see kind of the, composability that's happening with DeFi. So essentially, I guess the discussion here is as Ethereum DeFi grows out, things like the Graphs protocol, where they're offering the backend service to these dApps, I guess they had a downtime that actually happened. So I guess their cloud services were maxed out, and therefore when the Graphs protocol goes down, these different protocols, I think Aave is on here, as well as 1inch exchange. So like definitely familiar DeFi protocols are having issues kind of querying data from the Graph protocol when it does go down. So I guess my main question here, and I know a lot of the problems within DeFi, I guess with the transaction volume and things like that, don't have to deal with this actual query of data from the graph. But overall, my question and discussion piece would be, as Ethereum DeFi kind of gets built out and you see problems like maybe infrastructure problems that you see with the graph, according to this article, and I'll drop that here. As all this stuff happens, do we think maybe you have kind of a CryptoKitties-esque situation where you have the maybe want in the I guess product market fit, but the tech necessarily isn't built out, and you maybe see DeFi move away from Ethereum onto these other protocols? So just kind of in general, I know there's like two bits of questions there. One is kind of the transaction speeds and the transaction costs of doing, I know you said it fell recently, Mike, but just the transaction costs of Ethereum, as well as maybe the infrastructure that isn't there, like what we see with this graph protocol.
Yeah, I don't know why all of a sudden DeFi would be the thing that makes people switch, right? I mean, there was way more excitement and interaction with the ICOs. I mean, maybe DeFi hasn't peaked yet, and it's going to be, even bigger than Bitcoin, right? Like if it just went absolutely crazy and was the killer app for crypto as a whole, then maybe that is what then allows people to switch. But I don't see why all of a sudden this would become a problem that people switch over for, right? Like this has been a problem for many years, and ETH has always been able to use their first mover advantage and their network effect to deal with it in one way or another. I doubt it, right? I mean, that, other protocols will sell that to you and kind of say, hey, while you're one of 12 users, don't worry, we have the best tech, right? So just, kind of be aware of that. I mean, really, like, this is just another example of how early DeFi is in a lot of ways, right? Like decentralized finance, but 65% of, the back end data processing for just the front end of these DeFi websites is running through what seems like brand new company, right? Who's just using Google Cloud. So if Google Cloud goes down, or if somebody just simply DDoSes these websites or some component of DeFi and is able to, set up a scenario where no one can log into their account, where they go in and then hit some exploit, it's kind of like a joke, to be honest. We've come so far with a lot of like the technical specs in crypto. I mean, Binance, on the CeFi section, just spent 2 years like completely overhauling their exchange, both on the spot side and the future side. Mm-hmm. Yet like this giant movement of DeFi now is using some brand new data processing company that's like maxing out their Google Cloud set up. So it's like, it's like, what are we doing, guys?
Yeah, and I think it definitely makes sense to point out here that like when they query this data, it's basically what's being shown on the front end. So this isn't like a smart contract infrastructure plot. Like there's nothing, none of that is going on. Like there's no security issue. It's simply what somebody's going to see on a website when they're looking at different, I'm sure like different data charts and things like that. That's what you're querying Graph Protocol for. But certainly that's an issue. If you're trying to be involved in this ecosystem, you can't even get on the website and it's not showing accurate data because something goes down. That's obviously an issue. But go ahead, Dimitri. Sorry about stepping in there.
No, you're good. So yeah, I was just gonna mention, what you said about like the CryptoKitties stuff. Like things like that. Like, yeah, I completely agree. Obviously, with what Mike said. Kind of like, why would you have like 65% of the queries like running through that stuff when like during normal times, like in DeFi, where we haven't hit the volatility or really stress testing that sector yet, we're already having these issues, right? Like, can you imagine like once we start stress testing and we start having volatility in DeFi, and like something like this will be around, like, where it's like, bro, this thing goes down during normal times. Imagine how it's gonna perform, during like when volatility and everything picks up. So it's something that needs to be addressed, and it's hard sometimes in our industry to point out these issues without, let's say, like, for example, like CryptoKitties. I think the purpose of it was it benchmarked, the Ethereum, speed, and showed a lot of the issues that Ethereum had that people didn't really pay attention to, right? So the CryptoKitties really served a great purpose in that, in addressing, like, showing those issues, and then people started like addressing them and so on, right? Well, here, I'm glad this is happening now because, like, again, like I said, once things start escalating in DeFi and something like this happens during like ridiculous volatility and so on, right? We better be prepared for that. So hopefully we can stress test enough through these, times the volatility is low, and not have these issues with like queries, like just some displaying information on different sites that essentially is relevant because, you use that information maybe to make a decision, on what you're going to do with your portfolio and whatnot. What decision making do you're going to make based on the information that you see? If you don't see that information, how the hell are you going to make the decisions?
I wonder just how like large their infrastructure actually is, if it's getting maxed out when we're at such a low point, like you're saying. We're at such a nascent point in the DeFi space. Certainly there's been a ton more users than we're used to seeing in crypto, but if this is maxing out their like infrastructure, whatever they have set up with Google Cloud, like I'm certain there's bigger companies that obviously can handle much, more data queries and things like that. I could buy the complexity piece, but they need to get their infrastructure like built out quick if they're going to be going down at this point when we only have 26,000 I think was the number that was used earlier in the episode about users in DeFi. But anyways, yeah, that's the piece. I appreciate you guys' thoughts. Also appreciate everybody commenting along. I think we had Leonard talking about Zilliqa sharding. We had Renee talking about DeFi. Is DeFi mainly a necessity for big banks and institutional investors? ? And Leonard says, yes, the current system is outdated. I think when we start talking about Ethereum tech and what's happening, on that protocol. So, Renee, what do you guys make of Renee's comment there? Is DeFi mainly a necessity for big banks and institutional investors? What do you guys think?
I mean, DeFi is not using, or big banks and institutional investors aren't really using DeFi. I mean, there's some, more actively managed funds in the space that might be messing with DeFi a little bit, or some venture capital folks that have invested in DeFi projects. But I think the concept of big banks or larger institutional investors jumping into DeFi, is not correct. There's just, I mean, like, your Bank of Americas or even your smaller banks, your family offices are going to look at this and basically say there's way too much risk, right? There's way too much counterparty risk. And why would a centralized entity want to decentralize funds,
Lending and
that they
borrowing.
hold in the first place, right?
Mhm.
Then at that point they're not making any money. So it's maybe in like 40 years it's done in some sort of decentralized way, but whoever's kind of selling the fact that big banks and large investors are coming to DeFi, I think is pretty inaccurate, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, if to even talk about just like how the banks are heavily regulated and what is the KYC process on these DeFi platforms, like, come on, that's something that's not gonna allow these institutions to get in on DeFi just simply because of that. The really DeFi is the market for DeFi right now is from the retail side, and especially for those that, let's say, might be underbanked, unbanked, and those that cannot, let's say, get loans or do lending, with the banks. That's where DeFi is, right now fits. And right now banks like deal with those that are banked, and they go through traditional, setup right now, which works just fine. Eventually, I think what Mike, was saying is that down the road, I think that there'll be like a hybrid version of it, right? So it's like like a CFI setup, or like a combination of certain things where certain variables that get extracted from DeFi and get put into the regular finance, and that will be a baby of the new financial structure that will go forward. Because obviously we know there's some issues with the current structure right now in traditional finance, but them going fully DeFi is something that's kind of out there as a fiction more than reality.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's funny seeing a Coinbase go the opposite direction and become more like a centralized bank. I think they were offering like 0.001% on USDC the other day, or some kind of ridiculous amount that you see in like a savings account that you would in your like normal traditional banking system. So, yeah, shout out to Coinbase there.
For sure. I've got the next story here. There's been some rumors swirling around on Twitter and elsewhere. It looks like we've got the first article that's come out that basically China's private/public blockchain service network is starting to supposedly launch some of the other public blockchains. So they've been testing it for what feels like years at this point now. They've been doing it at some of your more kind of local government levels, supposedly. And the rumors have basically been that they're going to be integrating Ethereum and a project called Nervos, which we actually had on the podcast a handful of months ago with their marketing guy over there, Ben. So this came from a thread from Hasib Qureshi, who's a managing partner at Dragonfly Capital, used to be at Metastable, worked at Airbnb, Earn.com, pretty well respected in the space. I'm not sure if Dragonfly has investment exposure to Nervos or not. But there's been some other folks who've come out on Twitter and basically been like, hey, I've been asking around through my sources and I haven't heard any of this. So there's kind of been some back and forth until at some point today, a website called technode.com came out saying that they had the exclusive on Nervos being the first public blockchain to integrate with China's blockchain service network. And it's not too far of a reach to see why they would integrate a smaller project like a Nervos. Nervos was built by some of the largest folks from Ethereum. Their chief architect, Zhang Ji, worked directly with Vitalik as a core researcher. Had another co-founder who was the CTO of IM Token, which is the largest ETH wallet. And then they also have a team member who ran one of the largest Ethereum proof of work miners and still may at the current time. They've got a great relationship with the government, and I think also either partnered with or received investment from China Merchant Bank, which is a state-owned bank there in China. So it's not, kind of surprising based on that context, but it's still up in the air as far as rumors go. If you remember, a handful of months ago, China came out with a white paper of sorts for their BSN, saying that the first two public networks to be integrated were going to be Ethereum and EOS. So to move on and now be Ethereum and Nervos, or to add Nervos, is a change from that white paper. There's also been some talk about them working with Cosmos in their interoperability kind of play on that front, if you will, as well as Polkadot. So probably the rumors fall somewhere in the middle that, maybe there's some discussions going on or some progress being made. And that certainly China is considering a variety of different public networks. Supposedly these would only exist for overseas users to some degree. The majority of their blockchain service network is using more private instances of the blockchain in an effort to develop various dApps and other applications within China, and certainly as far as they can spread it elsewhere. But something to keep an eye on. And my question to you guys was whether or not you thought we could see another kind of similar China pump like we saw last year. I think it was where, basically the Prime Minister of China came out and was very bullish on blockchain, said that they were going to focus on it heavily. And all of the major Chinese public projects, Neo, Ontology, IOST, so many others, saw giant gains, basically immediately. So that's my question to you guys. Is this priced in, right? If China announces tomorrow that they're integrating ETH or EOS or one of these, is that kind of priced in already, or would that be a major bullish catalyst for those protocols?
God, I hope it's not priced into EOS's price. If it's priced into EOS, god damn, we're going to 50 cents, boys. I haven't heard a lot about China retail since that meme in like early 2018 where they were selling their presents. China retail has been absent, just from my kind of like westernized view. I know that's kind of like always the main goal of a lot of these projects that are trying to do that east-west connection. It's like China retail has got some purchasing power, and they obviously are I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but they've been shown to obviously jump into projects and kind of chase yield just like any Western user, but they've shown the affinity just like Americans to kind of get into that gambling aspect of maybe just jumping into a token here or there. So I guess the question being, do you see China retail jumping into Ethereum and these other smaller tokens? I mean,
or anyone, right? I mean, would an announcement for any of these projects, but especially the bigger ones, right? Mm-hmm. Would that have any effect on the price or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, China. I think I'm a believer in that sentiment. If you have China retail behind your project, you should see a good, sizable portion of your tokens being bought up, right, on the open market. So yeah, I think, and I think like the infrastructure is there more so now for retailer, like just like in the West, I feel like we have more infrastructure for people to get in on these tokens more so than we did back in 2017. But that's just me. Go ahead, Dima.
Yeah, I mean, the Ukrainian bear in me is gonna say that it's all priced in, it's overvalued, but but I'm gonna kind of explain my opinion a little bit better. So I think that in general, like, we see more information now coming out where like China is concerned, this like blockchain and all these networks like described. They mentioned EOS and ETH in the white paper. Now we have more that are coming out with these articles, IOSTs, like educating like the government of IOST network, and all that blockchain stuff, right? So like all of these, it seems like we tend to see from all these different protocols like, hey, we are working with China, like boom, here we are, and we're kind of seeing like prices reflecting that a little bit, right? We're seeing prices kind of come up. We've been in the alt season for quite some time already, but I think that obviously the announcement itself, if China comes out and confirms it and all systems go, I think the initial reaction will be obviously to the upside. I think because there's just speculators are going to be flooding, into the gates, and just like trying to capture FOMO in really quick, but which eventually will overextend the prices for those assets, and it'll go through correction. So but in the end, also, if you think about it, it's like, well, in the end,
Got him.
yeah, got him. Yeah. So in the end, we're saying less much. Oh yeah. So when they do choose these networks, right? So in the end, how's that going to translate into token price, right? Like nobody really answers that question. And I feel like before when China came out and said, like, when we had that China pump, eventually unwinded and went, obviously lower. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, fool me once, can't get fooled again, or how does it go? How did Bush say it?
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, one of the things I've been hearing more and more, and I think we brought it up in Layer1. I think Galen actually talked about this, but I've been hearing more about it in my own kind of groups, is trying to find DeFi within China. I think like what you've seen out of the DeFi movement so far is it's been primarily, at least from like a team base, it's been primarily driven by like Western teams, right? Western platforms. All the platforms you hear about today are most likely going to be like Western, depending on where they are. I mean, some are US, but I'm sure they're distributed. But just trying to find Eastern DeFi projects. I mean, like that's if you look at it and say, okay, well, this already happened within this retail group. What can happen if I find the next China DeFi project, and will a Chinese user be a user of the DeFi platform? So I don't know about the user base, but I do know that these teams from these various DeFi platforms are going to primarily be Western up to this point.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's been the that's kind of been the conclusion for most. So yeah, it looks like Nervos is up about 15% in 24 hours. So still hard to say whether or not there's truth there, but I'm sure rumors will continue to swirl around much past Nervos. There was some Chainlink info as well that they were going to use Chainlink for their Oracle setup. So there's more to come there for sure. And as far as discussion goes, that is the last piece of discussion we have. We're going to talk Bitcoin, ETH, EOS, and a little bit more DeFi.
Yeah, we gotta fly through these next portions. So we'll start with Bitcoin here, and we'll move on to ETH.
All right, cool. I'm your captain, Dimitri. Welcome on board to this plane. We're gonna fly through Bitcoin news. Some quick news, basically about Bitcoin mining. Farm buys up to 7.6K miners, despite the halving. It's actually a company called Core Scientific. Which essentially bought up this mining equipment from Bitmain. It's a S19, which is the latest model. Basically, we kind of saw that coming because it's like, well, after the halving, there's going to be new equipment that's going to be more efficient, which will essentially kind of battle the fact that the rewards are slashed in half. And in order to stay competitive in mining, you have to have better equipment. Therefore, the companies are doing upgrades right now. And this is, essentially Core Scientific is the U.S.-based company that's essentially, bought up the equipment. So good stuff for U.S. We're going to be staying competitive in the mining field, which essentially is going to bring liquidity to U.S. Where we are actually going to mine Bitcoin, and we're going to have that liquidity, so we don't have to rely on maybe as much on the Asian miners.
When S20s, like when if they're giving the S19s out for if Bitmain's getting like dumping these, when are they actually coming out with those S20s? That's my question.
Yeah, they're probably out already.
Exactly.
Probably they've worked on them for sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this order is fulfilled based on a lot of the chaos that's been going on with Bitmain between Jahan Wu and the other co-founder. They've kind of gone back and forth saying, they're taking over the company, and all this drama has evidently caused a lot of orders not to ship on time. So kind of continued chaos in the Bitcoin mining space. This has got to be a tough year for them, all things considered, with the March dump and then the halving and one of the largest chip manufacturers kind of in a little bit of drama or chaos right now as well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just really quick for the rest of Bitcoin news is just we had over 1 billion options expiration that happened last Friday. and you saw news, the headlines to expect mad volatility. Everything's gonna go super crazy. This is the biggest expiration that that was ever done in time of expirations. Blah blah blah. But we obviously talked about it in the desk that in general, options actually is a tool to actually slow down the volatility, enhance the price discoveries, smooth out the volatility, and so on, right? So, a lot of people are probably disappointed because they didn't see that much volatility because of the options expirations, but they don't really understand how options work. And a lot of the headlines that you saw from the reporters trying to, basically amplify this, they don't explain how that impacts the spot market because they probably don't understand that at all. They just kind of make assumptions and whatnot. So we passed that. The options did expire. Everything is Gucci. Bitcoin is still alive. As a matter of fact, it's still trading at 9100, unfortunately, still. But but so yeah, I just wanted to mention that the expiration went smooth, just like the options should be.
Awesome. Kieran's in the chat saying, "What's miners trashing Bitmain as well?" So I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on to Ethereum here. I just dropped the link. Interesting article. I feel like DApp Radar is kind of taking a back seat. I think it was like it was a real hot time when in I believe late 2018, early 2019, when dApps were really taking off and they were going to be the next biggest thing. And then, that all kind of died out. And I feel like DApp Radar's popularity kind of went with it, but they still do these quarterly ecosystem reports, which I found super interesting, man. I like this. I think this is like a summary of what will come out on July 1st. I believe that's what they said, but they basically break down the dApp ecosystem, probably the top 3 or 4 protocols, as well as some, they call it the best of the rest. But let me take you through a couple points here that they've summarized just from Ethereum. I guess overall dApp, I'm going to read directly from the article. It's here. It says overall dApp ecosystem activity has grown by 22% when comparing Q1 to Q2 in 2020. It looks like Ethereum has faced a decline in number of active wallets, but that mostly has to do with a decline in games category, but also DeFi and DEX activity have kind of evened out. So where you see kind of that 6% decline, you kind of see that could have been much worse if the DeFi and DEX activity wasn't kind of bringing that up. It looks like DeFi has grown tremendously in Q2, 230% when compared to Q1. There's a ton of really good stats in here. They go on to kind of talk about Tron and EOS, as well as the best of the rest, which is Hive, Wax, and Thundercore. So if you have time, check it out. They have some really cool interactive graphs as well that kind of show activity over time. I can read a couple things from the conclusions here. It says the reason behind Ethereum's decrease is high gas prices and a tremendous drop in games category activity. DeFi and DEX seem to be compensating for the loss with record daily active wallet figures in 2020. Talks about Tron having a lot of daily active wallets. EOS kind of trying to recover from that dip in games category that we saw with the high-risk gambling games that were on there. And then they go on to talk about Hive and Steam and whatnot. But overall, a really good report. Just a quick summary, which I guess they're going to put out the full kind of ecosystem report on July 1st. What did you guys make of anything that stood out from you on this little kind of summary?
I'd say it confirms kind of the real switch from dApps, like you said, being the next big push for ETH to DeFi. It makes sense that a lot of the activity has dried up. I think for a good maybe 12 to 18 months through 2018 and parts of 2019, after kind of the big bleed that crypto did, everyone said, okay, well, protocols had their time. Now it's time for applications in the application layer to do really well. And you saw, kind of big spikes in activity with a handful of different games on ETH. But now that DeFi is there and you can kind of earn all this yield over there, obviously the majority of users have flipped over to DeFi. So not surprising. I also wouldn't be surprised if dApps kind of came roaring back as well. But every application layer project just as many protocol, layer one projects struggle with is finding users, right? Like what users want to interact with a very simple kind of Pong style blockchain dApp that, takes 5 steps to kind of integrate, and you've got to pay transaction fees to play it, right? Yeah. It's just, it's tough.
Yeah, when those games initially came out in 2018, I think it had a lot more to do with that composability feature, where it was allowing maybe an already existing EOS user to do something with his tokens, right? As opposed to bringing in a non-crypto user and saying, here, play this game. It was more that there was literally nothing you could do with those tokens beforehand from like a game aspect, to now there's something. So we were all diving in heavy trying to play this frankly dumbass game, but it was the first time you could actually do something with those tokens in that ecosystem, which I think like kind of made it popular, at least for the moment. But to your point, man, like if we want to get to the point where there's a lot of people using these protocols, you got to make a cool game. I think you've been showing me a lot of games that have been coming out recently, and a lot of studios starting to work with these, at least AAA studios starting to work with these different protocols.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll fly through the rest. Actually, no, I think, Mike, you had the rest of the piece on Ethereum. But yeah.
Yeah. So interesting announcement here from Consensys and AMD. So AMD is a computer hardware parts company, basically the biggest competitor to NVIDIA, whereas Consensys is basically the, kind of the VC arm of sorts for ETH, and is run by Joe Lubin, who's a co-founder at Ethereum. They have both come together to announce a completion of nearly a $21 million funding round for a company called Web Cloud, which instead of an E, they throw a 3 in there, kind of, hinting at the growth of Web3, which has a goal of basically creating a global network of high-performance data centers that will power the various parts of the blockchain economy. So one of kind of the elephants in the room within crypto for both, layer one projects who are running nodes, as well as your more application layer projects, or some of your kind of middleware types, like we saw in the story with the Graph protocol, is that they're all reliant on AWS or Google Cloud, or one of the major cloud providers globally. They do this because it's cheaper. It's super live. It's almost never down. So it makes sense that they would use this centralized, cloud provider. But the problem, of course, becomes that, when you try to deploy a decentralized solution on top of a centralized cloud provider, you don't really do so in a super decentralized way. There's a giant attack vector in the form of that cloud provider. So the goal of Web Cloud is to, basically create the first decentralized blockchain-based, global cloud network. And they've got about $21 million coming in from Consensys and AMD here. It's something that's definitely needed. I think it's going to take some time, and it'll be interesting to see how this kind of scales out and grows in comparison to some of these other large centralized cloud providers, right? I mean, how expensive is it going to be, and what sort of incentives are those who are using these centralized cloud providers going to see in order to switch over and pay more to be more further decentralized, right? I think the excuse from time to time has been, well, this is our only option, right? AWS is the only thing that will work. But if Web Cloud comes out and is able to provide the same solution but for more money, we'll begin to see who actually is willing to spend the money for that more decentralized setup. So, big raise there for the Web Cloud team for sure.
Absolutely, it's a rare W for the Consensys team too. I feel like this is going to be something that might end up working out in the end, as opposed to a lot of their previous ventures. But anyways, Dimitri, can you do something for me real quick? I'm about to go into EOS, but it looks like Leonard said, I guess PayPal might have come out with another announcement on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I already checked it. Yeah, they basically announced that they integrated. Now you can buy Bitcoin through PayPal app.
So it's kind of a further.
It's live.
Got it. Is that so? It's live on service now.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Leonard coming through with the breaking news for us. Appreciate you, man. Cool. All right. Well, who's getting on the PayPal payments and buying some Bitcoin?
I can't wait until there's going to be a bunch of like scammy giveaways using PayPal and Bitcoin. Like I can see that already happening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a good old Elon Musk giveaway possibly. But so I've got the EOS news. There's a couple pieces here that are kind of broken up, and they're within the EOS ecosystem. I think people could make the argument that maybe talking about Wax is not talking about EOS, but we're gonna go ahead and do that. We've got a announcement from the Wax team. They continuously are putting out this advisory council and the additional members. So I guess since we last talked, they had Rich Widman from Google. They also came out with Microsoft, but more recently they came out with a guy from Marvel, Jay Ong. So the executive vice president as well as the head of Marvel Games actually comes on their advisory council. So I mean, again, as far as these advisory announcements go, I'd love to actually hear from the person and hear from them on how they plan on integrating what they're doing, specifically, I guess, where they're working. Like Jay could tell us what he's going to do and integrate Marvel into to Wax a little bit. But I'm sure, working along those lines, he works at Marvel Games. You've got the NFT play that Wax is trying to push consistently. So another announcement from Wax. We'll see as the advisory council gets built out. The other one that they did announce, and this is kind of a meme, but William Shatner is coming to Wax. So the actual article, and I'll drop it here, it might sound a little ridiculous, and it did come out on Cointelegraph, so you always got to be careful. But William Shatner actually seemed really cognizant of blockchain and crypto, which was interesting. I just dropped the link. It was an interview. I don't know if it was by the Cointelegraph team or it was by someone else, and Cointelegraph posted it. But they essentially had this interview with William Shatner, and he was breaking down like blockchain use cases, how we're moving into this new digital age. And I was just like, well, shit. Like I did not expect that coming from William Shatner himself, but he seems to be a real progressive individual. So check out that article. Who knows what it does for Wax in general? But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, that's Star Trek memorabilia, I'm guessing, that can now be on the Wax blockchain. So they're doing things in that space. I think one thing that wasn't talked about on the DApp radar, I think they were talking about. God, if I could go back to it, they had no mention of this NFT craze that's been happening on Wax as the reason Wax is having users in their ecosystem, which I think mainly is driving users on Wax or at least active wallet signups. So, any thoughts on the old Shatmeister coming to Wax?
Shatner on the blockchain is just so peak 2020. seeing him like arguing with random people on Twitter about how this is like the most amazing blockchain innovation was definitely something to see.
Yep. Anything, Dima?
Yeah. Actually, I don't have much to comment on that because I've just realized how hard we got trolled with this PayPal news.
No.
Oh
yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Leonard.
Oh no. Leonard, come on, man. So this tweet that he's talking about, and everybody's kind of talking about right now, came from, it says PayPal Plus, but if you read the actual handle, it says crypto_bitlord, and it basically,
No, we got bitlorded. No.
Yeah, we got bitlorded. Yeah. So it's
Shut it off. Shut it off.
Yeah.
He got somebody. He got Peter Brandt recently. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I just dropped the tweet in chat so you guys can take a look and laugh about it. But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No.
Yikes.
All right. Well, I mean, we got third partied here. We
I know, right?
we didn't get directly
It came from the labs, man.
It did come
Came
from the
from the-
lads. Leonard, you're not officially a part of the lads until you get in our Telegram group, and definitely you're going to find yourself having a harder time now. Just kidding. But anyways, let me finish with this EOS news. We got to get Mike out of here. I've got EOS Israel inviting the EOS community to celebrate the launch of Voice Social. So if you guys weren't keeping tabs on Voice, it's obviously launching to the world. It's only been in the US up to this point, but is launching to the world on July 4th. So EOS Israel is hosting this meetup. I guess it's a VR meetup. I'm going to drop the link here, but that is pretty much it. Voice Social is going live shortly, July 4th. We'll see what happens with users onboarding to Voice. I haven't really kept up with the token economics, but that's been like the main driver around why I would want to, get onto Voice. From a social media aspect, it didn't really tickle my fancy, but obviously that having a token involved in gamifying social media posts, that's something I'm interested in. So I guess Kieran's asking for the link to the PayPal troll tweet. There's a couple others comments that we'll get to here in a second, but okay, awesome. So we'll hit DeFi and then we'll pop off here. I didn't move it again. God dang. Scott's on.
So just really quick for DeFi, the first piece of news I got is basically about Open, which is this platform, OPYN, launches put options on Compound tokens. So now you can go on Open and basically, buy some put options if you'd like. Obviously, as we know, and I've talked about it many times on the desk, the purpose of options is basically specifically for put options. You can hedge your long position, right? So if you hold Compound, you might want to buy some put options, because then if the price of Compound falls, you have that put option there that kind of protects the downside risk for you as a holder. So it's used as a hedge. It's also used as speculation for trading as well. So if you think Compound is going to fall, speculators might hop in and buy some put options for that. It's interesting how they decided to do put options and not call options with that, included. But looks like you can only buy puts on Open right now for Compound.
Very nice. I've got the final piece of DeFi news here, and the final piece of news for the episode here today. Another, in this case, Tim Draper-backed DeFi project has successfully raised some money, but they've done it in what they're calling a initial DEX offering. So IDO is the new IEO, which was the new ICO. This one, like I said, is backed by Draper. It's called DeFi Money Market, which, like many others, is doing loans. So they're claiming that instead of it being a variable rate, they're going to be able to offer this yield farm of sorts that can do 6.25% on ETH, DAI, and USDC, which are pretty strong rates. The very interesting piece here is that they claim to be backed by real world assets. So, they're trying not to collateralize in something that, has an underlying value that's super variable, which, should hopefully allow them to best set that interest rate at something that they can consistently offer, and also help ensure that those who are borrowing from the system don't get kind of instantly liquidated when the price of the assets are changing and we see a ton of volatility. Interestingly enough, there's, as of right now, a little less than $8.8 million worth of active assets, and they're all backed by cars, primarily car liens. So, for example, the first loan that comes up here is a 2007 Ford Edge SUV, where this one is a Honda Accord. There's another one on here for a 1998 Dodge Ram. I mean, I'm like...
What?
Ready to just like pull my eyes out. This is just crazy. I mean, Draper invests in the future, right? Whenever he bought a ton of Bitcoin back in 2012 or 2013 at auction from the U.S. government, people thought he overpaid when he bought them for like $1,000 or whatever. Fast forward to today, and he looks like a genius. So maybe at some point in the future, this DeFi money market is backed by a ton of real world assets versus just old cars. The thing that I feel like everybody knows with cars is that they don't really hold value well. So it's kind of strange to me that you would use an asset like old cars, who everyone knows doesn't hold value well, to be kind of the first form of collateral.
Well, antique cars hold value well, don't they?
Yeah,
for sure, but not a 1998 Dodge Ram. It's pretty much all
That's just like your run of the mill car, isn't it?
There's no like 67 Mustang in here, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Well, eventually that car will be antique, if you hold it long enough.
Yeah.
Guys, we made it
I'll
far
put
down
a lot of money on that.
Oh, we made it far down the rabbit hole, fellas. This is this is an interesting conversation we're having, but that seems to be the last story we have today. That was an interesting one to end on. We appreciate everybody kind of following along to the end. Leonard, you were a really good commenter today, even though you kind of got us a bit lorded there for a second. But we appreciate everybody following along. That kind of was joining us this episode. You guys got anything before we head off here?
Yeah, it looks like that's the reason probably we got that one thumbs down because of PayPal news. But it was. I think it was a great show. So
you got anything, Mike?
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll see you guys next week. We got Dimitri's Desk tomorrow, right, Dean?
Yep, exactly. 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yep, two episodes this week, guys, as well as those 2 episodes of Dimitri's Desk. Scott's in the chat using lads, so it was a great show, lads. Lads and ladies, we appreciate you stopping by. I did drop the link there to the public channel, t.me/join Layer1. So Leonard, if you want to get in there, I can get you a private invite to our Telegram channel. You can become one of the lads yourself if you would like. But anyways, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you next week.